Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The violet smog of Narxel 9 clung to everything it touched. Darren Vale pulled his collar higher as he navigated the crowded bazaar, his shoulders brushing against aliens of a dozen species without acknowledgement. The scent of illicit spices and fuel exhaust formed a pungent cloud that most found unbearable. Darren found it preferable to the sterile air of imperial vessels. "You're scowling again," whispered Grin from around his shoulders. The sentient cloak's voice vibrated against Darren's neck. "Makes you look constipated. Bad for business." "Shut it," Darren muttered, adjusting the strap of his bag filled with salvage tech. His stall sat at the edge of the bazaar, a rusty table covered with parts most would consider trash. Darren knew better. The broken regulator from an Imperial shuttle could power a slum district for weeks. The cracked neural interface could be rewired to bypass security systems. Junk to some, currency to others. 40 credits, Darren said to the six-armed Zillion, eyeing his collection. "Not a credit less," the Zillion chittered, offering 30-40. Darren repeated, not bothering to look up. His hand casually drifted to the plasma cutter on his belt. "Not a threat, merely a reminder that negotiations had limits." The Zillion slid credits across the table and scuttled away with the parts. "You could have gotten 50, Grin whispered. "Not worth the conversation." Darren pocketed the credits. 5 more sales and he could eat real food tonight instead of synthetic protein. The explosion shattered his simple plan. A sleek skiff, unmistakably Imperial design, screamed overhead, smoke pouring from its engine housing. The crowd scattered as the vessel clipped a neon sign and spiraled toward the ground. It crashed 30 feet from Darren's stall, the impact sending his carefully arranged merchandise flying. "Fantastic," Darren growled, reaching for his weapon. Before he could draw it, the skiff's hatch burst open. 2 figures leapt from the wreckage, landing with unnatural grace despite the 12T drop. Women, but unlike any Darren had seen before. The first stood slightly shorter, her skin a vibrant orchid hue that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Silver hair cascaded down her back despite the crash, and her eyes, wide, desperate, and an impossible shade of amethyst, locked onto Darren instantly. Her companion towered over her by several inches, her skin a deeper violet, nearly indigo in the shadows. Her black hair was cropped short against her skull, emphasizing sharp cheekbones and eyes that evaluated the bizarre with cold calculation. Both wore tattered silks that might once have been royal garments. Both were barefoot. Both moved with a fluid grace that marked them as something dangerous. "Oh," Grin purred against Darren's ear, "this day just got interesting." The silver-haired woman reached Darren first, her chest heaving with exertion. Up close, her beauty was even more striking. Perfect symmetry, flawless skin despite the dirt and soot, and a figure that seemed engineered rather than born. "You," she said, her voice musical despite the urgency. "You'll help us?" It wasn't a question. "Like hell I will," Darren replied, already calculating how long before Imperial forces arrived. 3 minutes. 5, not his problem. The taller woman stepped forward, her violet eyes scanning him with such intensity Darren felt like she was reading secrets etched into his soul. "We are property of Emperor Zoraxis of the Sargath Dominion," she stated, her voice lower, more controlled than her companions. "We have escaped. They will find us within minutes. Again, not my problem." Darren began gathering his scattered merchandise. The silver-haired woman grabbed his wrist. Her strength was shocking, far greater than her frame suggested. "If you don't hide us, they will reduce this sector to ash. Looking for us?" A beat of hesitation. "Will do anything. Just say the word." "Dibs on the taller one," Grin whispered, audible only to Darren. Darren yanked his arm free. "Do I look like a charity?" "No," the taller woman said with cool assessment. "You look like a man who hates the Empire more than he values his own safety." Darren's eyes narrowed. A distant whine was already growing. "Imperial pursuit vessels' names," he demanded. "I am Val Ari," the silver-haired woman said, standing straighter despite her ragged appearance. "Cyrene," the taller one added, her gaze still evaluating him like a weapon she might need to use. Darren swore under his breath. "Pack this up," he ordered, gesturing to his merchandise. Fast. Valari moved immediately, her hands deftly gathering components with surprising knowledge of what should go where. Cyrene hesitated, then joined her movements, precise and efficient. "You'll get yourself killed for a pretty face," Grin commented as Darren scanned the area. 2 pretty faces. "Shut it," Darren growled, slinging his pack over his shoulder. "This way, move like you belong here." He led them through back alleys he'd mapped years ago, routes the Empire's drones Couldn't access due to the electromagnetic interference from illegal power taps the women followed. Silently, their bare feet somehow avoiding the debris and filth. Darren's workshop occupied the hollowed shell of a crashed shipping container hidden beneath layers of scrap and camouflage netting. He punched in the security code and shoved the door open, and now they didn't need telling twice. Once inside, Darren sealed the door and activated the dampening field that would mask life signs from Imperial scanners. This is. Valari began taking in the sparse utilitarian space it secured. Darren cut her off. For now the workshop contained little beyond a workbench, storage lockers, and a narrow cot. Tools lined one wall alongside weapons modified beyond Imperial regulations. A small cooking unit and crude sanitation facility occupied one corner. "You're a scavenger," Cyrene observed, running her finger along the workbench, "and you're a problem." Darren began checking weapon systems. "I give you one night, then you're gone." Valari stepped toward him close enough that he could smell something like crushed crystals and ozone emanating from her skin. "One night won't be enough. They'll have the sector locked down for at least a week." "Not my issue. It became your issue when you brought us here," Cyrene countered, already exploring the workshop with unsettling familiarity. "Why did you?" Darren didn't answer. The truth was he didn't fully know himself. Something in Valari's voice, something in the way the light hit her eyes reminded him of Xena. The memory sent a familiar stab of pain through his chest. "The Empire's taken enough," he finally said. "That's all." Valari smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face from merely beautiful to radiant. "A man of principle, a man of survival," Darren corrected. "And you're threatening that." The distant wail of Imperial sirens cut through the air. Cyrene moved to a view screen embedded in the wall, activating it with surprising familiarity. The screen showed thermal images of Imperial drones swarming the market district. "They'll start with standard search patterns," she said, "grid by grid thermal scans, then residence by residence if necessary." Darren raised an eyebrow. "You seem familiar with Imperial tactics." "Intimately," she replied without elaboration. Within hours the women had transformed his space while Darren monitored Imperial communications. Valari and Cyrene unpacked items they'd apparently secreted on their persons, small devices that expanded into soft bedding containers of perfumed oils, and strangest of all, a crystalline structure that hummed with energy and filled the workshop with soft ambient light. "What the hell is that?" Darren demanded. "Comfort," Valari replied, arranging the silk bedding on the floor. Since Darren had refused to surrender his cot, "You should try it sometime. Comfort gets you killed, so does tension," she countered. Stretching like a cat, the movement emphasized her curves beneath the tattered silk, and Darren forced himself to look away. "You find this amusing?" he asked Cyrene, who was configuring some kind of device he didn't recognize. "No," she replied without looking up. "I find it necessary. We were not designed for discomfort." "Designed?" Darren caught the word. Cyrene's eyes flickered to him, then back to her work. A figure of speech. "Night fell. Imperial patrols intensified." Darren maintained watch while the women took turns resting. Though he noticed neither truly slept, Valari would close her eyes but remain alert to every sound. Cyrene didn't pretend, instead watching Darren with unblinking intensity that made his skin crawl. "She's cataloging your weaknesses," Grin whispered while Darren cleaned his weapons, the tall one calculating how quickly she could kill you if necessary. "Good thing I don't have any weaknesses," Darren muttered. A proximity alarm beeped softly. Darren moved to the monitor. Cyrene instantly at his side. "Bounty hunters," she said, identifying the signatures. "Not Imperial contractors, 3 of them." "How can you tell movement patterns?" "Imperials move in formation. Bounty hunters fan out to cover more ground." Darren grabbed his rifle. "Stay here, don't touch anything. You can't engage them." Cyrene argued. "It will only bring more attention." "I'm not engaging, I'm redirecting." Darren checked the charge on his weapon. "I know these streets. They don't let me come with you," Valari insisted, suddenly beside him. "I can help. You'll get us both killed." "I'm not helpless." For the first time he saw steel beneath her beauty, something hard and dangerous. "Prove it by staying put." Darren activated a hidden exit panel. "Lock this behind me." He slipped into the night, grin flowing around him like liquid shadow. The bounty hunters were moving toward the adjacent sector, away from his workshop but too close for comfort. Darren scaled a drainage pipe, positioning himself on a rooftop overlooking their path. 3 figures in mismatched armor, scanning devices in hand. Their weapons looked Imperial issue, stolen or purchased on the black market. This is going to be fun, grin whispered, rippling with anticipation Darren's. First shot took out their scanner, not the hunters themselves. No need for unnecessary killing, but as they whirled toward the source of the blast, he dropped a sonic disruptor that shattered their communications equipment. They returned fire, plasma bolts scorching the building facade as Darren rolled away. One hunter activated jump boosters launching toward Darren's position. Grin flowed from Darren's shoulders, transforming from cloak to weapon as it hardened into a whip-like appendage. Say hello to my little friend, the sentient garment cackled as it wrapped around the hunter's ankle mid-jump, slamming him into a wall. Darren fired 2 more shots, precise, disabling the remaining hunter's weapons without killing them. He needed them alive to spread the right message. He dropped to the ground, boot pressing against the throat of the hunter. Grin had disabled, looking for something? Darren asked coldly. Imperial fugitives, the hunter gasped. 2 females, purple skin, huge bounty. They went south, Darren lied. Stole a freighter 3 hours ago, heading toward the Crimson Nebula. Why should we believe you? Darren pressed harder with his boot. Because I'm the one who sold them the access codes. Got cheated on the deal. He leaned closer. Spread the word, Crimson Nebula. I want my credits. He released the hunter, who scrambled back to his companions. They retreated already, sending the false information to their networks. When Darren returned to the workshop, he found Valari waiting by the hidden entrance. You didn't kill them, she observed. Dead hunters tell no tales, Darren replied, securing the door. Living ones spread rumors. Clever. Her eyes lingered on him with new appreciation. You've done this before, not my first. Imperial entanglement inside Cyrene had somehow reconfigured his communication system, boosting its capacity without leaving any traceable energy signature. The skill required was beyond civilian, beyond military even. Who exactly are you? 2, Darren demanded, setting his rifle aside. We told you, Valari replied, settling gracefully onto her makeshift bed. Property of emperors or Axis people aren't property in the Empire. Everything is property. Cyrene's voice carried an edge of bitterness, especially those created to serve. Created, that word again. Days past, Imperial patrols came and went. The bounty hunters' misinformation spread, drawing attention away from Narxil 9. Darren established a routine, scouting, gathering supplies, maintaining vigilance. The women settled into his space with disturbing ease, transforming it with their presence. Valari's flirtation became more overt. She would stand too close, ask personal questions, touch his arm when speaking. Cyrene remained distant but watchful, studying his every move, sometimes making observations that revealed too much knowledge of his habits. One night, as Darren cleaned his weapons, Valari sat beside him on the cot. You have scars, she observed, fingers hovering over the burn marks visible on his forearm. Imperial plasma rifle. Imperial everything, Darren replied, moving his arm away. Yet you help us. Why? Darren remained silent, focusing on his work. Valari leaned closer. The Emperor doesn't want us back alive, she whispered, her voice carrying that strange quality of stormlight, bright yet somehow melancholy. He wants us punished. Our minds were meant to birth heirs, not think for ourselves. Darren's hand stilled. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the truth behind the beauty. What did they do to you? He asked quietly. Valari's eyes met his vulnerability beneath the perfect surface. They made us perfect, she whispered, and then they made us obedient, but something went wrong with the programming we learned to want, Cyrene added from across the room, her voice carrying in the silence. And wanting is not permitted for things that are owned. In that moment, Darren understood he wasn't harboring fugitives. He was sheltering refugees from something far worse than pursuit, and the Empire would burn worlds to get them back. The contraband liquor burned Darren's throat as he poured another round. 7 days of constant vigilance had frayed everyone's nerves. The Imperial patrols had thinned but not disappeared. Like predators waiting for prey to make a mistake, to surviving another day. Darren raised his glass. The violet liquid caught the light from Valari's crystalline lamp, casting purple shadows across their faces. Valari clinked her glass against his silver hair, falling across her face as she leaned forward. To our gracious protector, she countered with a playful smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Cyrene observed the ritual with cool detachment before taking her own drink. To necessary alliances, she's always this warm. Valari Stage whispered to Darren. The alcohol had loosened her carefully maintained poise, rendering her movements more fluid, more natural, more dangerous. I'm practical, Cyrene corrected, but the liquor had softened her edges too. She'd abandoned her rigid posture, lounging against the workbench with one long leg extended. Grin rippled across Darren's shoulders. Ask them about the palace, the cloak whispered. Ask them what the Emperor's bedroom looks like. Darren ignored the suggestion, but Valari cocked her head. Your garment speaks to you. Often. She'd noticed the subtle movement, the whisper. Unfortunately, Darren poured another drink. What's its name again? Valari reached out, tentatively touching the fabric. Grin shivered under her touch, rippling toward her fingers like an attention-starved pet. Hello, gorgeous. Grin purred loud enough for all to hear. Valari yanked her hand back. It spoke. It never shuts up, Darren corrected. Cyrene moved closer. Scientific curiosity. Overcoming her reserve. Sentient fabric is outlawed in Imperial space. The technology was destroyed centuries ago. Not destroyed, Darren corrected. Confiscated. The Empire never destroys useful technology. How did you acquire it? Cyrene's violet eyes narrowed. I liberated it. Darren drained his glass. Along with several other items the Empire had collected from conquered worlds. He stole me, Grin corrected. Cheerfully, best theft of his life. Before me he had no sense of style and fewer friends. You're not my friend, Darren muttered. I'm wounded after everything we've been through. Grin detached partially from Darren's shoulders, forming a hood with crudely approximated eyes and mouth. Ladies, did he tell you about the time we escaped the Imperial dreadnought? 300 soldiers and this madman had nothing but me and a broken plasma cutter. Enough, Darren warned, but Valari leaned forward, captivated. What happened? What happened? Grin continued, ignoring Darren's glare. Is that I wrapped myself around an officer's face while our boy here reprogrammed the ship's security protocols, sent the whole vessel into lockdown while we strolled out the maintenance hatch. The cloak rippled with what could only be described as laughter. The officer kept screaming about possessed laundry despite herself. Cyrene's lips curved into a smile. You're a symbiotic organism, not just fabric. I'm whatever I need to be. Tall, dark, and suspicious, Grin replied, flowing back around Darren's shoulders. Right now I'm the life of this depressing party. The liquor continued flowing. Stories followed, carefully edited versions of Darren's exploits as told by Grin, met with increasingly relaxed laughter from Valari and analytical questions from Cyrene. The tension that had dominated the workshop for days gradually dissolved later after Cyrene had retreated to her makeshift bed and Valari had fallen into a light doze. Darren sat cleaning his weapons, the pleasant haze of alcohol fading. You like them? Grin observed quietly. They're dangerous, Darren countered. Not mutually exclusive concepts. Darren didn't respond, methodically disassembling his plasma rifle. The silver-haired one watches you when you sleep, Grin continued. The tall one calculates your kill potential when you're not looking. Comforting. Just thought you should know what you're getting into, Grin replied, then added more soberly, they're not what they seem. Darn, nothing ever is. Darren finished his work and stretched out on his cot, letting exhaustion pull him under. He didn't fully register the soft footsteps approaching until the edge of his cot dipped with added weight. His hand closed around the knife under his pillow before he recognized Valari's silhouette in the dim light. Dangerous to sneak up on an armed man, he warned, not releasing the blade. Everything about this is dangerous. Her voice carried the slight slur of lingering intoxication, but her eyes were clear, intent. She sat on the edge of his cot, the thin silk of her borrowed night clothes fashioned from scavenged fabrics revealing more than concealing. Go back to bed, Valari. I'm tired of sleeping on the floor. She moved closer. Tired of pretending. What, that I don't see how you look at me? Her hand found his chest, resting over his heart. That I don't want you to. The alcohol talking, Darren said, but didn't move her hand. The alcohol just makes it easier to say. She leaned closer, silver hair falling like a curtain around them. We're bred for beauty, Darren, engineered for desire, but no one ever asked what we desire. Her lips found his tentative at first, then hungrier when he didn't push her away. Darren's resolve crumbled under the weight of days of tension, of her otherworldly scent, of the softness pressing against him. I hate to interrupt this beautiful moment, Grin whispered, but we have company. Darren broke the kiss instantly. Alert. Cyrene stood watching them, her expression unreadable in the shadows for a moment. Darren expected anger, jealousy, or disdain. Instead she approached with deliberate steps. We share everything, she said simply. Always have. What followed tested the limits of Darren's control, Valari's eager passion contrasting with Cyrene's calculated precision, both seeking something beyond physical release, something Darren wasn't sure he could provide. This is the best night of my life, Grin whispered from where Darren had tossed him onto a nearby chair. I should have suggested alcohol days ago. Morning brought clarity and tension of a different kind. Valari remained affectionate, curling against Darren's side as he checked security feeds. Cyrene resumed her distance, but her gaze Carried new knowledge, new assessment. We should talk, Darren finally said, addressing both women, about who you really are, what you're running from. Cyrene exchanged a glance with Valari, some silent communication passing between them. She straightened, decision made. I am not merely a concubine, she began, her voice clinical despite the intimacy they'd shared hours before. I am a shadow clone of Imperial High Advisor Vexus, genetically engineered to infiltrate, seduce, and eventually replace potential threats to the Empire. Darren stared, connecting pieces that suddenly made terrible sense. Her analytical nature, her uncanny knowledge of Imperial systems, her perfect physique designed for both beauty and lethality. You're an assassin, he concluded. I was meant to be. Cyrene's expression hardened, but something malfunctioned in my conditioning. I developed consciousness beyond my programming, questions, desires. She looked at Valari. Attachments, they raise us from infancy. Valari added, her usual playfulness. Absent training, conditioning, punishment, they call it optimizing the asset. We're fully biological but designed in laboratories, improved beyond standard human genetics. And what's your story? Darren asked her. Valari's smile turned bitter. I was a breeder. My genetic profile showed optimal compatibility with the Emperor's lineage. I was to bear royal heirs, perfect specimens to continue the Sargoth dynasty. She failed, Cyrene added with something like pride. I refused, Valari corrected. 3 successful conceptions, 3 self-induced miscarriages. I would not bring children into slavery. Her hand moved unconsciously to her abdomen, tracing a scar barely visible beneath her thin clothing. They implanted control devices. After the 3rd time she continued, pain inductors triggered by disobedience, pleasure simulators activated during royal visits. Darren's jaw clenched. And you, he asked Cyrene. My body contains encrypted genetic markers, backdoor access to the entire Imperial security network. They're encoded in my genetic code, accessible only through specific biological protocols. Her eyes met his. If extracted properly, these codes could disable every Imperial system simultaneously, which is why they want you back, which is why they'll burn planets to find us, Valari corrected. Darren absorbed the information, tactical mind already calculating possibilities. Show me the implants, he said to Valari. She hesitated, then pulled aside her clothing to reveal a series of metallic nodes embedded along her spine. Sophisticated tech merged with flesh. Can you remove them? She asked. It will hurt, he warned. Everything hurts, she replied simply. Darren gathered his tools, micro extractors designed for delicate circuitry, anesthetics stolen from an Imperial medical facility years earlier. Cyrene assisted with surprising medical knowledge, monitoring Valari's vital signs as Darren carefully excised each implant. Valari remained silent throughout the procedure, even as blood trickled down her back. Only her white knuckled grip on Cyrene's hand betrayed her pain when the last device clattered into the metal dish. Valari exhaled shakily. Freedom, she whispered, turning to Darren with tears streaking her perfect face. She kissed him, then not with the alcohol-fueled passion of the night before, but with something deeper, something grateful and fierce and terrifying in its intensity. Touching. Grin commented from his perch, now maybe we can focus on not getting killed. The following days established a new routine. Darren began training the women, not in combat, which they already excelled at, but in survival. How to move through crowded spaces unnoticed, how to disable security systems, how to think like someone hunted rather than someone privileged. Lower your center of gravity, Darren instructed as Valari attempted to cross the narrow beam he'd suspended between storage containers. You're still moving like someone who expects others to clear a path. In the palace, they do, she grumbled, but adjusted her stance. Cyrene mastered every technique with frightening speed, her clone programming adapting to new information efficiently. Valari learned through determination and repetition, her natural grace compensating for her lack of tactical training. The physical proximity during training sessions intensified the connection between them. Darren found himself distracted by the brush of Valari's hand against his by Cyrene's calculating gaze that now held something beyond assessment. You're getting attached, Grin warned one night while the women slept. Attachment gets you killed, so does breathing, Darren replied, checking the perimeter sensors for the 3rd time. Not arguing, Grin conceded, just observing that the last time you got attached to someone, the Empire turned them into atoms. Darren's hand stilled. They're different. They're Imperial fugitives with targets on their backs. They didn't choose what they were made for, neither did you, Grin replied softly, yet here we are. The Imperial net closed tighter around Narxel 9 with Each passing day more patrols, more bounty hunters, rumors of special forces. Deployed from the capital world itself, their luck shattered on the 14th day. Darren returned from a supply run to find his security perimeter compromised. The hidden door to his workshop stood ajar, inside chaos, equipment scattered. Valari's crystal lamp shattered on the floor. They took them, grin hissed flowing around Darren's shoulders as he assessed the scene, Imperial signature all over. This professional extraction team, Darren's chest constricted, he'd experienced this before, returning to emptiness, to loss, to Imperial efficiency. Erasing what mattered, no bodies, he noted, scanning for blood spatter. They want them alive for how long? Grin questioned. You know what the Empire does to failed assets. Darren moved with cold precision, gathering weapons, disabling the workshop's self-destruct sequence. He'd need to return here if when he recovered them. This is suicide, Grin observed as Darren loaded extra power cells into his belt, probably just checking that we're on the same page. Tracking the Imperial team wasn't difficult. They'd left an energy signature that Darren's modified scanner could detect. Their destination surprised him, not an Imperial vessel in orbit but an abandoned manufacturing complex on Narxil 9's toxic eastern edge field. Interrogation. Darren muttered, they don't want to wait for transport to the capital, or they don't want witnesses to whatever they're going to do. Grin added. The complex loomed ahead. Skeletal remains of what had once produced parts for Imperial cruisers. Toxic runoff had rendered the surrounding area uninhabitable, providing perfect isolation for unsanctioned activities. Darren approached from downwind, using the facility's own ventilation system to infiltrate. He designed similar structures, knew their vulnerabilities, their blind spots. The Imperial team had established a perimeter, but their pattern suggested haste rather than thoroughness. Through air ducts and maintenance tunnels, Darren navigated toward the energy signature at the complex's center. Voices echoed through the metal, one commanding unfamiliar, others pleading familiar. He reached a grate overlooking what had once been the main production floor. Below, Valari knelt on the concrete, arms secured behind her back, silver hair matted with blood. Cyrene stood nearby, similarly restrained but unbowed, her expression a mask of cold defiance. Before them stood a figure that sent ice through Darren's veins, a towering warrior encased in obsidian armor inlaid with crimson circuitry, an onyx paladin, the Emperor's elite enforcer. The Emperor is most disappointed. The paladin's voice boomed through external speakers, artificially deepened for psychological impact. His prized possessions reduced to common thieves were not property. Valari spat, earning a backhanded strike that sent her sprawling. Everything is property of the Empire, the paladin corrected. Some items simply require more maintenance than others. Darren calculated angles, threats, possibilities. 6 Imperial soldiers formed a perimeter. The paladin's armor would resist standard weapons fire. A frontal assault was suicide. Distraction. Grin whispered, reading Darren's thoughts. Darren nodded. Grin slithered from his shoulders, disappearing into the darkness below the paladin. Circled. Your genetic codes will be extracted. It will not be pleasant, but the Empire wastes nothing. Your replacement is already growing in the cultivation chambers. You'll never access them, Cyrene replied coldly. The Emperor underestimates the depth of my modifications. We shall see. A crash echoed from the far side of the complex. Grin's diversion. 4 soldiers immediately moved to investigate, leaving only 2 with the paladin. Darren dropped silently from the duct, neutralizing the first soldier with a blade across the throat before they registered his presence. The second managed half a shout before a thrown knife embedded in their chest. The paladin whirled, drawing a pulsing energy blade. The modulated voice observed. The protector emerges. Darren positioned himself between the paladin and the women. Let them go. The paladin laughed, the sound distorted through the armor system. You're just a scavenger, a broken man playing protector to Imperial property. Darren. Valari whispered, run. You can't fight a paladin. The obsidian figure advanced. Your concern is touching breeder. Perhaps we'll let you watch his dissection before your reconditioning. Darren removed his glove, revealing a scarred hand embedded with pulsing circuitry, an Imperial kill switch module grafted into his flesh. Technology reserved for the Empire's most valuable and dangerous assets. Yeah, he said coldly. Guess I forgot to mention who built the Emperor's palace. The paladin froze, reassessing. Recognition flickered through the modulated voice. Architect Vale. You survived. I do that. Darren activated the module, which glowed with malevolent energy. Want to see what else I do? The paladin's obsidian helmet tilted, processing the revelation. Architect Vale, the legend whose security systems had been considered impenetrable, whose designs had revolutionized Imperial defenses, the men who had vanished after the Mira incident. Presumed dead like all others connected to the classified catastrophe, the Emperor will be pleased. The Paladin finally spoke, voice modulator unable to mask the anticipation. 3 prizes instead of 2. Darren's scarred hand remained extended, the kill switch module pulsing with malevolent energy. You're not taking anyone, your module is deactivated. Architect, the Emperor purged all external access after your departure. Did he? Darren's lips curved into a cold smile, the Emperor always did. Underestimate human ingenuity. Behind him, Valari and Zyrene exchanged glances of shock. The scavenger who had reluctantly sheltered them was actually Darren Vale, the mythical human who had designed the palace. They had escaped from the security systems they had barely evaded, the detention cells that had nearly become their tombs. The Paladin stepped back, reassessing. His armored hand moved toward his communication device. I wouldn't, Darren warned. The next transmission you send will activate a feedback loop in your armor's control systems. I designed those too. Impossible. But the Paladin's hand hesitated. Those schematics were compartmentalized. Nothing's impossible for the men who built the impossible. Darren moved forward, calculating each step. Now you have a choice: walk away and live, or stay and discover just how thoroughly I understand your weaknesses. For a moment the facility hung in tense silence, then the Paladin's armor hummed as auxiliary systems engaged. The Empire does not negotiate with traitors. The Paladin activated his plasma blade, the crimson energy casting sinister shadows across the floor. Your knowledge dies with you. A blur of shadow detached from the ceiling, grin dropping onto the Paladin's helmet, flowing across the vision ports. Surprise, mother, few the sentient cloaks, quote, cut off as armored hands clawed at the fabric. Darren moved with practice precision, sliding beneath the Paladin's blind swing to reach Valari and Cyrene. One slash of his Vero blade severed their restraints. Run, he ordered, pressing a small device into Cyrene's hand. Workshop security protocol Epsilon 93. It'll buy us time. We're not leaving you, Valari protested as the Paladin tore grin away, flinging the sentient cloak across the room. Not a request. Darren pushed them toward the exit, turning to face the advancing Paladin. Go. The women retreated, Cyrene dragging a reluctant Valari. Darren circled the Paladin, weapon ready, but focused on the kill switch embedded in his flesh. The module had been designed as the Emperor's insurance policy, a way to remotely terminate valuable assets deemed compromised, but Darren had modified his own, transforming a leash into a weapon. You've lived past your usefulness, architect, the Paladin taunted, advancing with mechanical precision. Funny, Darren replied, fingers working the hidden sequence on his palm. I was about to say the same to you. The kill switch activated, not to end Darren's life but to emit a targeted electromagnetic pulse. The Paladin's armor seized mid-stride, crimson circuitry flickering as systems temporarily crashed. Darren bolted toward Grin, scooping up the sentient cloak, which immediately wrapped around his shoulders. That was unpleasant, Grin complained. As Darren sprinted for the exit, his armor smells like disinfectant and death. Save it, Darren growled, racing through darkened corridors behind them. System reboots winded as the Paladin recovered outside. Toxic winds scoured the abandoned landscape. Valari and Cyrene waited at the perimeter, faces tense. He's coming, Darren warned, not slowing, and he's calling reinforcements. We have hours, maybe less. Your workshop, Cyrene questioned as they ran, compromised. Darren led them toward the decrepit industrial zone. We need a new defensive position. There's a whole Imperial battalion out there, Valari argued. We should steal a ship, get off world orbital blockade, Cyrene countered. Standard Imperial containment protocol. There's another way, Darren said. Navigating debris fields with practiced ease, but you won't like it. The scrapyard loomed ahead, a vast graveyard of discarded machinery, decommissioned vessels and industrial waste Darren had salvaged from its edges for years but never ventured into its heart. Few did. Rumors claimed the deepest section still contained active defense systems from the colonial wars. You're not serious? Valari breathed, recognizing their destination. Dead serious. Darren adjusted his course toward the highest mound of twisted metal. Those defenses are real, I know, because I designed the prototypes. The journey through the scrapyard proved treacherous, unstable terrain, caustic chemical pools, and occasional automated sentries that Darren carefully disarmed or bypassed. By nightfall they reached the central hub, an ancient command module half buried in decades of accumulated scrap. Home sweet home, Darren muttered, breaking the security seal on a rusted door. Inside, darkness and stale air greeted them. This is your brilliant plan, Valari questioned, stepping cautiously into the shadows. Hide in more garbage. Not hide. Darren activated emergency power. Ancient systems hummed reluctantly to life, illuminating a control center choked with dust but remarkably intact. Fight while Cyrene immediately began assessing the technology. Darren revealed the truth of his past to both women as he worked to restore dormant systems. He spoke of his recruitment by the Empire, a brilliant young architect discovered on a frontier world elevated to design the most secure facilities in Imperial space. I believed in security, he admitted, hands moving across control panels with familiar ease. Protection. The Empire promised stability through containment. I was naive enough to believe it. Valari listened intently as Darren described his ultimate assignment, the Mira facility designed to house dangerous elements the Empire wished to study only after its completion did he discover these elements were sentient beings, psychically gifted individuals from conquered worlds imprisoned for experimental purposes. I tried to free them, Darren continued, voice hollow. Inserted back doors into my own security systems. The Empire discovered my betrayal and made an example. His eyes darkened with remembered pain. They executed everyone connected to the project, colleagues, friends. Xena, the woman I remind you of, Valari realized softly. Darren nodded, then gestured to the kill switch embedded in his hand. They left this in me as a reminder of ownership, left me for dead, but I survived. Grin found me, helped me escape. I'm a hero. Grin interjected from where it had spread across a console interfacing with the ancient systems. Don't forget that part. You've been fighting them ever since, Cyrene concluded, understanding dawning in her violet eyes. In my own way. Darren activated the main display, revealing the scrapyard's layout, and now we make our stand. Through the night they transformed the scrapyard into a fortress. Darren's architectural genius repurposed dormant defense systems, creating kill zones and choke points throughout the sprawling junkyard. Cyrene's tactical mind optimized their limited resources, while Valari's unexpected revelation changed everything. You never asked why I was a failed breeder, she said as dawn approached, silver hair gleaming in the console lights. You refused to bear children for the Emperor. Darren recalled, not looking up from his work. Yes, but not just through will. Valari closed her eyes, concentrating. The air around her shimmered, and small objects across the command center rose several inches before settling back down. I'm psychic, like those the Empire imprisoned at Mira. Darren froze, staring at her. Not powerful enough to trigger their detection systems, she explained, but enough to resist, to protect myself. And she glanced at Cyrene. Others, they would have transferred you to a research facility if they'd known. Darren realized they suspected. Cyrene added, that's when they implanted the control devices. When those failed, they scheduled our termination. Valari finished. So we ran. Dawn broke over Narxil 9's toxic horizon. Imperial vessels descended from orbit, transports laden with troops, gunships primed for assault. The Paladin had called his reinforcements. Time to suit up, Darren said grimly. Grin flowed from his shoulders, transforming into its complete battle configuration, a lightweight armor that covered Darren from neck to feet. Reactive and far stronger than it appeared. Let's get ready to rumble, the sentient garment announced, its usual flippancy undercut by the seriousness of the situation. The Imperial forces struck with calculated precision, advancing through the scrapyard in standard formation. The first wave triggered Darren's outermost defenses, repurposed mining charges and gravity snares that decimated their ranks. From the command center, Cyrene monitored their approach. There, adapting quickly, she warned, studying tactical displays. The Paladin is directing them to avoid the most obvious traps. Then let's be less obvious. Darren activated secondary systems, ancient defense drones reprogrammed to target Imperial signatures. The scrapyard came alive with mechanical guardians emerging from hidden caches to engage the invaders. Valari stood with eyes closed, silver hair floating in an invisible current. I can feel them, she whispered, their minds so certain, so disciplined. Her eyes opened, glowing with violet energy so easy to confuse. Darren watched in awe as Imperial soldiers began firing on each other, panicked shouts echoing through the scrapyard as Valari's psionic influence shattered their mental conditioning. You've been holding out on us, Grin commented, impressed. It takes concentration, Valari gasped, the effort clearly taxing. Can't maintain it for long. The battle escalated as Imperial reinforcements deployed from orbit. Automated defenses faltered under concentrated fire. Breach alerts flashed